I've said this a couple of times already. The CSPM as it stands today would die, unfortunately.
Ashish, how many episodes did you guys do with the Cloud Security podcast?
So once a week. It's been running for 5 years.
So what we are doing now, what we're going to try to do now, Ashish, is really compress all the golden nuggets that you guys have
all the knowledge.
Collecting over the years. We're going to try to bring that into the Reinvent Security podcast.
Data sovereignty. After 15 years of cloud adoption, I think, the first company started 15, 20 years ago, is still on the table. It's still an item. Welcome to Reinvent Security, the podcast where we on a monthly basis learn from industry leaders how they reinvented security and how you can turn their experiences into action. Join us as we chat with information security professionals dissecting the field of information security and its developments. Because when this episode ends, the real question begins. What will you do differently tomorrow? Let's reinvent our field one strategy at a time. My name is Jeroen Prinse. I'm a transformational CISO with 2 decades of experience, and I'm here with my co-host Irfaan Santoe.
Yeah, thank you, Jeroen. For those who do not know me, my name is Irfaan Santoe, a security executive who's tremendously passionate about solving the information security problem that we have.
So today we are going to talk about cloud security, because in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape, cloud computing has become the backbone of modern IT infrastructure. From data breaches to compliance issues, cloud security is a critical concern that requires innovative strategies and vigilant practices. In this episode, we'll delve into the intricacies of cloud security, exploring how organizations can safeguard their digital assets while harnessing the power of the cloud. We are thrilled to have Ashish Rajan, a prominent figure in the cloud security realm, join us today. Ashish is the host of the wildly acclaimed cloud security podcast and the founder of Kaizenteq, a consultancy firm focused on helping businesses enhance their cloud security posture. With years of experience and a deep understanding of cloud technologies, Ashish has been a guidance in the industry, a guiding force. He's educating and inspiring professionals to rethink and strengthen their security strategies. His insights and expertise, I think, are invaluable for anyone looking to navigate the complexities of cloud security. So welcome, Ashish. So happy that you can join us today.
I'm definitely honored to be here. I did want to tweak a bit on the Kaizenteq thing. It's more of an advisory firm rather than consulting company, but I'll take the consulting thing. So Kaizenteq essentially is an edtech and an advisory firm at this point. That's how I would describe it. And we advise CISOs and CTOs on emerging technologies like AI and cloud. So that's where that's focusing on. That's why Cloud Security Podcast and the AI Cybersecurity Podcast, which is the second sister podcast we started about a year ago. But Sorry, I just wanted to set that right in case everyone is like, what?
Yeah, no, that's
I think a great call out that we have started. She has started a new podcast, the AI Security Podcast as well. So
AI Cybersecurity Podcast.
Yeah, busy times as well, I think.
I intentionally kept away from the security word because when people talk about AI security, they kind of imagine like an CCTV camera security, those guys are saying AI as well. So in general, when we say, I think we all understand AI security, we mean AI cybersecurity. But on the massive scale, they somehow think it's like, oh, you mean video cameras? I'm like, no, that's not video cameras. What are you on about? So anyway, that's why we ended up using cybersecurity. So yeah, we definitely get asked, why don't you just say security? I'm like, definitely didn't want to say security.
I got it.
Sorry. It's an interesting conversation for probably another podcast.
Oh, that's absolutely fine. So could you please introduce yourself in your own words and tell our listeners a little bit about the work that you're doing in the field of security and cloud, and maybe touch up on AI as well?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. Ashish Rajan, as you said, and I've been in the cybersecurity space for a little over 14 years. If people who are watching this or listening to this, if they see the gray hair on my face, that's pretty much what it is. And that's also because for the last few years before I left my, I won't say it was more of a transition from I started off as an identity and access management person, transitioned to security architect, security engineer, became a cloud architect, then started a SOC team, got into a role for CISO, did that for a while. The last CISO role that I had, which I resigned from 2 years ago, that was me expanding security team across Australia, New York, France, and just Paris, and UK and Ireland. That was my last gig, and that's when I got introduced to like a multi-cloud kind of space, and it was a really interesting journey. I'm sure there's a lot I can talk about that as well as to what those challenges were. But then after that, while COVID was going on, we started this cloud security podcast, and I was doing that while I was a CISO, and that kind of became, I guess, my calling card on the internet, for lack of a better word. So when anyone does Google me, they'll find a lot of information about cloud security. So I'm grateful that we got to have a lot of people who are, I would say, experts and great practitioners in cloud security who've come on the podcast and shared the knowledge, and that's resonated with all the other leaders and practitioners who hear us on different topics of cloud security, cloud native security. I think initially when we started, or at least when I started in the cloud space I want to say at least 10 years ago now, it feels quite long ago. It was primarily just talking about, hey, why should security trust the use of cloud in the first place? And now conversations are more about why not, and conversations are about multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. Hey, I only want private cloud because I don't trust Amazon, Microsoft, Google, or whatever. So it's a lot more mature conversation these days. So now in 2024, we also found as emerging technology, AI started coming up quite often. We started getting reach out from people for, hey, what do you do for AI? What am I doing for the AI? So we have started doing a lot of advisory for CISOs on the AI space. And then we realized that there's a lot of misinformation on the whole AI cybersecurity side.
Definitely.
So last year, we started AI Cybersecurity Podcast with Caleb Sima, who used to be CISO of Robinhood. And he is currently the, I want to say, CSA, which is the Cloud Security Alliance AI Safety Committee person. I'm sure Caleb is listening to like, wait, dude, you should get the intro right. But that's essentially what we started AI Cybersecurity Podcast. But I've been in the cybersecurity space for a long time. And these days, as we were saying in the introduction, Kaizenteq is the advisory firm that we run, where we work with leaders and practitioners to advise them on emerging technology like AI and cloud. And I think our media arm, which is kind of how we get a lot of attention, and basically bring value to the people, is the Cloud Security Podcast and AI Cybersecurity Podcast. So that was longer than 30 seconds, I thought, but hopefully that at least gives some context to people.
It's very complete, I think. Thank you so much. I think we get a good picture on how you're contributing to, reinventing security and cloud adoption and AI adoption, and like in a secure AI adoption. So thank you for that. I do appreciate it, right?
Maybe just to add to what's going to happen now in the episode as well, because Ashish, how many episodes did you guys do with the Cloud Security podcast?
So once a week. It's been running for 5 years, so...
It's like
it's been a while.
200 plus. So what we are doing now, what we're going to try to do now, is really compress all the golden nuggets that you guys have
all the knowledge,
collecting over the years. We're going to try to bring that into the Reinvent Security podcast.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm up for the challenge. Let's do it.
So let's start with like the first question that came to mind, right? So what do you see as the primary security challenge organizations face when they are moved to the cloud? How can they prepare to address these challenges effectively?
I feel it's funny. I would have had a very different answer, say 4 years ago. These days, I feel for people who are even getting into cloud security. Like if I was hired as a cloud security person and I move into like an enterprise or or even a startup for that matter, there's just way too many options. Like over 300 services, how many would be used and how many would not be used, you have no idea. But in all of that confusion, there's one North Star that still works. And I think people should use that as a way to start having conversations about cloud security. The fundamentals of security have not really changed, even with AI for that matter. And yours still responsible for making sure applications secure, whether they are on Kubernetes or whether they are on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, doesn't really matter. It's just a different environment. Like, so if you are an experienced person who's helping an organization get into cloud, From a practitioner perspective, you probably find as long as you can map your existing knowledge to how a cloud does it, you probably will be fine. If you are a leader and if you're trying to build a security program, which is, hey, I want to move into cloud and this is my deadline, whether I'm getting our data center or I hate Amazon or Google or Microsoft or whatever, or I'm going to private cloud or coming from private cloud to public cloud, I would say some of the challenges you would find is cultural challenges in the company in terms of when you write a security program. And if you are used to the waterfall methodology, which you would have used in the past, and it's funny, I think I used to find that, maybe waterfall doesn't exist anymore, but I still talk to a lot of companies that have waterfall methodology. And I'm pretty sure if people listening to this and think that, is this an actual waterfall? I would definitely encourage you to Google waterfall. And I'm showing my age over here by talking about waterfall and agile, everything. But if you have had waterfall before and you're trying to start a cloud security program, I would say definitely work together with the broader colleagues of yours in terms of agile. What does it look like in cloud and how quickly are they deploying into production? There's a lot more to be thinking about from that perspective. So I'll probably go first, understand the cultural challenge. Second, if you already have resources that are in the cloud, I would probably, it's like someone on the podcast spoke about this and I loved it. This individual is, he volunteers for emergency response. So he would, if there's a fire or if there's something, he'll just jump onto it. And he says cybersecurity is very similar. If you are joining as a CISO in a company, and you basically, all you see around yourself is just basically fire everywhere, potentially in the beginning. You can't put out all the fire. That's the reality. But you can at least start with the one which is the most priority. Can you save something right now in the quickest time possible? That should be a priority. So that's the second thing I'll call out, that use that as an opportunity to prioritize where you want the first few months or a quarter probably for your attention to go for the cloud space, whether it's your talent or whether the lack of talent or whether it's the fact that, hey, I don't have any visibility into cloud. I don't know how long it's been going on for. So I would say those two would be the ones where I'll start as a leader. And if you are someone who's a practitioner listening to this, you're probably an architect or engineer, you probably want to narrow down on few of the services that are critical that give you a lot more wider scope of coverage across the cloud that you're working with. I think those would be quick wins for you to kind of look at least from a strategic perspective. Yeah. Hopefully that kind of answers the question.
Yeah. So maybe when I started the question, the listeners thought, here comes a very technical answer, right? It's all about identity, or make sure that all the data is encrypted.
But I can even go down that path as well if you want.
No, definitely not. I think you're spot on, because that is what I find as well in the organizations that I've been working with, is the cultural challenge. It's the way of working that has been changed or is going to change.
Or needs to change.
And the lack of knowledge within people or the willingness to move from what they have done for the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, right? So I definitely resonate with your insight here. Yeah, thank you for that. So what are some of the best practices for securing cloud environments? Are there specific strategies or tools that you would recommend for organizations starting in their cloud journey?
So as in starting today or thinking about, they're doing cloud for a while, now they're thinking about cloud security? Because I think there's a difference in what would be a best practice if you were to starting on day zero, we're a startup, versus someone has been in the cloud, now I hired a cloud security person.
Let's look at it from the perspective of an organization that has already adopted some of the cloud, whether it's Azure or Google or Amazon, it really doesn't matter. Because I think a lot of organizations are struggling with what are the best practices here? What are we supposed to do? Can we follow a specific strategy?
Yeah. So they have already experimented with it, Ashish, and now they would say, okay, now I need to probably scale it. That's where the journey starts. Or
sure.
You would come in to advise them.
Yes.
Perfect. So in that scenario, I would probably say to what was called out earlier, funny enough, identity is still, and the sidebar on the identity piece, when I was started my career as an identity person, I thought this is such a lame career. Like, why would someone talk about username password for the rest of their life? Until I started working for enterprise and realized how complex username passwords and MFAs and things could be. So I would say if you are an organization who's basically been experimenting with cloud and now you're ready to take that next step for cloud security, the first thing, and I'll solidify this with some stats as well, there are primarily 4 reasons why you hear about any cloud hack out there. Mm-hmm. 2 of them, maybe I'll say 2 of them are related to the fact that someone has left a resource on the internet, exposed to the internet, and it's just wonderful.
A misconfiguration, right?
Yeah. So it's misconfigured. I left my S3 bucket or my blob storage on the internet, and someone's basically got access to it, or my Kubernetes API server or whatever. Yep. Now, the other part of primarily if you look at the 3 parts that cause it, are all identity and credential related. Mm-hmm. And identity is kind of like the biggest piece in there, and identity is the new black, or whatever you want to use as a word for it's kind of come back, and it's been there for a while. A lot of enterprise have dedicated fields for it, but identity is even more important in the cloud context because it is like the way I would say it, it's like third party that you work with as an organization. So getting a hold of your identity, centralizing it is the first thing I would do, especially if you have multiple clouds. Centralize the identity, whether it's single sign-on, SAML, OpenID, whatever you want to use a standard to make the identity centralized across all your cloud environments. It doesn't matter if you have just one of the provider, 4 providers, 5 providers. That would save you so much, because when you are trying to look at deprovisioning of users, when you're trying to look at onboarding of users, change of role, you'll find a lot of gaps. But what it also does, it also makes you realize that, hey, if there was an incident, can Ashish get access to the environment that he wants to quickly? Because you want to be able to respond quickly, and you don't want to think about identity at that point in time. But in saying that is just the first layer, and I would stop there, but you can definitely go deeper, because there's a whole concept on different cloud providers treat identity differently. So I'll definitely, but before I jump onto that, I would just say centralized identity, that's a good strategic win. You're already way ahead of a lot of other people by doing single sign-on as well as 2FA if you want to, especially for both API as well as like console access or even your CLI access. The next one after that I'll call out is after you've kind of sorted out the identity, the next step I usually go down the path is that identify what are your most commonly used resources. And the reason I say that, I was going to talk about the fact that I'm going to make an assumption you have not got any on-premise, but if you had on-premise, don't use the security policy from on-premise as a Bible for what it's going to be on the cloud as well. But I don't say ditch it completely. I use that as a base for, I've done encryption this way, but I don't have to do it the same way in cloud. I've done virtual machine security, vulnerability management, backup, disaster recovery this way. I've got Commvault for my backup, whatever the resources would be. I would say start building a policy if you have an opportunity to build a policy for what would a standard look like in terms of a blueprint for if someone creates a resource in cloud, what should be the minimum security standard that it should have. Like, for example, it could be the fact that encryption of volume, because it's a drop down in all cloud providers, you should just be able to pick that up and go, hey, minimum AES 254 or whatever. The second thing you'll call out is resources should not be open to the internet. Remember I said out of the 5, 3 are more around resources facing the internet. If you know for sure what resources are there, make sure they are not facing the internet. The other one I will call out, and I'll shut up after that, because I think I normally give out things in 3s or 5s. So I feel like I don't want to give too much information that people just get lost in it.
Yes.
The third one I'll call out, because we are seeing a lot of people work on AI projects these days, I would now put the third as data security. And I don't mean data security in the context of, hey, have a data compliance policy or whatever, but more in the context of having awareness for what kind of data is going in what kind of cloud and how you're segregating the environments for cloud, where the data would be going. These days, I would say that has become a lot more priority than if you have those 2 covered, you don't have resources facing the internet and you have identity centralized, the next cab off the rank that you probably would worry about is that, there's a lot of AI projects that are using third-party LLMs or other services. how do I get a handle on the data security part? Have I defined what minimum encryption for data looks like?
Yeah.
Have I defined what kind of data is allowed in what part of the cloud, and what kind of people are allowed access to the cloud, the encryption of the cloud, data, like everything that is in your context of the organization. Like obviously there are DLP solutions that claim they do a lot of things. Amazon or Microsoft, all of them have services for it, but you'll find that their services are more focused on certain services. Like Microsoft primarily does DLP across Outlook, Defender, Outlook, all of that.
Yeah.
Your Azure, AWS does it on the S3 bucket, which is a service called Macy. By the way, if you go multilingual, because we had this challenge where we had presence in Manila, in China, no, it's like those algorithms are not designed to understand non-English sensitive words. So now you're in this territory for, if you're speaking English and if all your sensitive data in English, then you're kind of covered. But then if you are in a non-English speaking country where all data is written in a non-English context, whether maybe it's German or Dutch or whatever else, suddenly you're in this territory for sensitive data is not being picked up. So I would say that should be the third focus, considering there's so much, so many AI projects being run at the moment. So I'll take a pause there.
Yeah,
I don't want to bombard everyone with a lot of information, but
it's
hopefully
like gems, 250 episodes of knowledge and nuggets being dropped in like a few minutes. So just to summarize, I think you said misconfiguration. You should really deal with that. So be sure that you have some sort of a baseline that you can monitor and have guardrails in place. That there are controls that you can say, hey, this blob storage is connected to the internet. It should never be public. There's like an autocorrective function, even if you will. Identity and access management. Centralize all your identities. Make sure that you establish a good identity and access management policy. Take care so that you can take care of your joiner, mover, leaver scenarios. And make sure that you have that foundation in place. It's also quite often the foundation for what security professionals call the zero trust. It all revolves around identity and access management. So be sure to have that in place. And then the third is data security. Make sure that you have some data loss prevention tool in place. Make sure that you have insights in where you store your data, whether you encrypt your data. And the last nugget that I pulled from it, so you gave 4 instead of 3, is don't implement your on-prem security policy for your cloud security policy. Make sure that you leverage the capabilities in the cloud and off the cloud to...
You have to think differently.
To some extent. I mean, you still need to encrypt data, right? But you're not going to... I hopefully, as an organization, for example, you need to make the choice between, do you want to store the key on-prem or do you want to store the key on the cloud? Because if you do it on-prem, for example, you're introducing an availability risk, right? If your on-prem service or the internet connectivity or the connectivity to your cloud fails, you can't access your data. So,
excellent.
Make sure that you customize the policy, or at least think cloud within your policy. So the cloud security landscape, Ashish, is constantly evolving. What are some of the, I think, latest innovations or trends in cloud security that you, as a person, find most exciting or promising?
I think there are 2 specific things I want to call out. One is incident response in cloud. It has never been spoken about enough. A lot of the documentation, a lot of the conversation online and everywhere else is all about, hey, how do I stop misconfiguration? How do I enable compliance in cloud? How do I do whatever architecture in cloud, or whatever the example would be? If you notice, there's not a lot of conversations that happen around incident response in cloud. And there's a couple of reasons for it as well, because there's there is no native capability for this in cloud. It's someone like the identity example that I spoke about earlier, where someone has to make sure that Ashish, the incident response person, can actually, get in and get access to the resource which is potentially compromised. But a step before that is like, hey, do I have logging and monitoring available for Ashish to even look at, or for me to even detect there's an incident? There's like a lot of the conversations about cloud security, for some reason, for all these years, always ended on the fact that, hey, logging and monitoring, I've enabled CloudWatch or enabled Azure activity logs, and that's it. Bob's your uncle at that point in time, I move on. But no one talks about the response side and, hey, if something got picked up, but is it a false positive, not false positive? So I would say incident response in cloud, and we're definitely making an effort on our side for making 2024 a lot more about the offensive side and the response side of cloud. And I think we're fortunate enough that we had quite a few people who are in the space who are willing to talk about it as well. The second thing I'll call out is that there's a lot of there's a lot of acronyms in cloud security. Mm-hmm. And I would call out there's CSPM, CWPP, CIEM. I mean, you can just keep, every C acronym you can think of, there's more coming in as well. Yeah. And I definitely find that the challenge and the thing that needs attention is that now people who are seeing all this as practitioners in their organization, they probably need to take a step back, because we're at that point where you can't differentiate much between one CSPM provider and the other CSPM provider, one CNAPP provider to another CNAPP provider. As a lot of the times people are spending money or because it's cheaper, may not have all the features, but at least just one side. So it's not a lot of from a coverage perspective, now it's not just a cloud. I've got cloud, I've got AI, I've got data, I've got vulnerability management. Like CNAPP has become like CNAPP plus. Yeah. Right? I don't know if you guys have seen this as well, but I feel like most of the bigger players and I understand, they're trying to expand and they're trying to make this big. And if you talk to investors in this space as well, they tell you that, hey, the cloud adoption still hasn't reached its peak yet. It's still growing. People are still going to cloud. No. So I understand it's a big market, and all of these would somehow, at some point, like cloud would become that foundational layer on which everything is built. Like the same way both of you are quite experienced as well. A lot of us were not talking about data center. We would talk about data center as like, oh, there's a data center here, but we don't talk about the nitty-gritty of it. Like I'm not walking into a air-conditioned room trying to figure out which rack is the right one to plug into, whatever. The same way, I think ultimately we'll get to a point where cloud would become that kind of conversation. It just becomes like an abstraction layer. So I would say the second thing I would want people to think about is that now it's that time for you to pick the right things, the right product for the right job or the right tool for the right job, and not be confused by when marketing tells you, oh, we do AI, data, blah, 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 because you're not going to use all of them. No. Like that's the reality of it. You're just going to probably, if you go back to the example we just had before where we spoke about, hey, I am someone who's starting today, or maybe experiment with cloud, and I'm going to go into the space of cloud security. The last thing you want is like a multifaceted CSPM CNAPP provider with like lights going on for Kubernetes, lights going for AI, data, everything. And you just basically be overwhelmed. So I would say make a choice for what should be the first stage that you start with. And even a simple CSPM or a cloud security posture manager is good enough. When you're trying to figure it out.
Incident response and cloud security posture management, right? That was the
pick the right CSPM. Yeah. Like you don't have to go for the most expensive or the most popular one, but maybe more maturity is there in the market. Yeah. Like from when we started talking about cloud security 7-8 years ago to me starting the podcast until today. Like right now, it's very easy for me to get information about AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. What are the good practices? But what is difficult for me is that instead of going by what a blog or a video or an interview tells me, is to look into my organization and go, okay, actually, I already have these capabilities. I've got Ashish here, who's a super skilled engineer, or another person. Why do I need to have these things? I can just build, like Netflix does this. They've been doing it successfully. They were trailblazers for this for a while. Salesforce did it. So being conscious is where I'm coming from. Like it's not just about CSPM. It's being conscious about what kind of CSPM do you need. Do you need the most shiny one or the one that's just the right one for you?
Yep. Agreed. I think that goes for all the tools out there and all the capabilities, right? I would love to do at some point an incident response deep dive for cloud. I really want to ask questions about this to you, Ashish. But
Yeah, for sure.
I want to also dive into a little bit because I know that is kind of a thing in the Netherlands at the moment, and I know that the listeners are curious about this. So, data sovereignty is something that is on the board table quite a lot. So, for example, I was in the car over here to the studio, and there was an item on the news that the Dutch government, for example, uses cloud email service providers by Microsoft, and there's a espionage risk because there's a American company who manages the service, and they might get access to the data, right? So data sovereignty. After like 15 years of cloud adoption, I think the first company started like 15, 20 years ago, is still on the table. It's still an item. How do you see it impacting cloud security strategies? What measures do you recommend to organizations if they are concerned about their data sovereignty?
So the first part, I would say the data sovereignty at the moment, the impact on practitioners is that they would be limited in the number of services they can use from a provider. And it kind of goes into the whole tactical solution as well. Mm-hmm. That's why I called it on the beginning. It's like when you are someone who is concerned about data sovereignty and concerned about just where the data is located and how it will be transmitted, there's a lot of, and we haven't even gone into the whole spectrum of like, is there even a data center from the cloud provider you want to work with in your country or in your city or in your region? If you go from that, like almost zoomed in view, you definitely find that a lot of people in the beginning who were using Amazon in Europe, they were using the data center in Dublin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now, and Frankfurt.
And London as well for some reason.
Frankfurt but I think as well.
You as an organization would have to do a risk assessment to understand, am I comfortable? Like, for example, if we kind of go back to the three things I spoke about in the data security piece, the third one, if you have an understanding of the kind of data that you are putting into your cloud, if it's all public data, you may not, like data sovereignty would not be the number one problem that you have. However, if you are dealing with data of your citizens or dealing with driving license, passport, a lot of information that is considered classified as sensitive by all levels, then I would say you start putting more attention to this. Now, I don't want to completely say that, hey, cloud service providers are not doing anything. They definitely are trying to open more data centers because they understand the need for it. And the interesting part for me has been that over the past few years, no one used to talk about Oracle Cloud, but now suddenly the Oracle Cloud is suddenly popping up everywhere. And I realized the reason for this was they were smart in the sense that wherever Azure, Google Cloud, or AWS did not have a data center, they opened a data center there. Mm-hmm. Which meant that data sovereignty became an interesting thing because we're like, oh, I just go to Oracle Cloud, like Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and all those regions. I mean, now they have Azure, but before that, they were all Oracle Cloud because of data sovereignty. So it's a missed opportunity for the cloud service providers. It's a missed opportunity for the organizations that want to use certain services that are not available in their region. Yeah. And at that point in time, as someone who's a leader or practitioner, your call would be to work with the business to understand, hey, are we as a business making the call that if we don't have any sensitive data, I can still use the service because that's what my risk assessment tells me? Or am I making the call that as an organization, we're going to go for a local alternate for whatever the service is, but then that's going to add to the cost and integration. Like you spoke about earlier, that the policy on premise and what you want to do is use the cloud native capability because that's what makes you go faster and all of that. So that I feel like there's two parts to it. One is the loss of potentially not having services and balancing that with the kind of data that you're putting in those services. And the other part being, hey, as a business, how crucial is it? And are we making the call that we're okay not to be creative and instead use something which is more localized, like perhaps like someone somewhere in Netherlands only has a company that does the exact same thing, happy to kind of contribute back into the government and everything else. Like that's the two things that you would have to balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So luckily, a lot of the cloud service providers are introducing a data sovereignty program. Azure, I know, did it because we are leveraging the sovereignty controls that they put into place in their Azure Cloud for Sovereignty. Controls like confidential compute, where the data stays continuously encrypted while it's being processed. So at rest, in use, and at transit. I find that really promising. Also, that they are keeping the data in Amsterdam, for example, or in the country that it resides. And pardon me, there are a lot of additional controls that you can have in place. So that sounds promising. Looking ahead, what do you see as the future for cloud security? Are there any emerging threats or opportunities that organizations should be aware of?
We still haven't seen the peak of cloud or cloud security yet. So there's still a lot to come in. I think the confusion that I was talking about, where a lot of the CSPM providers are becoming a platform that's pulling in your AppSec data, pulling in your data security data, pulling in your vulnerability management with agent, without agent, whatever model you want to choose. I would say from a new threat landscape perspective, you probably, unfortunately, we still are talking about those 5 problems where resources are misconfigured unless to open to the internet, identity, and you can go back as far as you want. It's not more than that. In fact, I think Attack MITRE, which is I think they're like a popular research company. I think they're a research company. But if you look at Attack MITRE, which basically they are responsible for coming out with TTPs, or tools, tactics, and procedures used by malicious actors on the internet for different platforms. And even their research on the cloud space landed on those 5. So, the data is obvious and it's in front of you in terms of where you want to focus. So I would say that part, I don't see that change for now. Even with AI, I don't see that change. But what would become interesting is that we would ultimately start accepting, to your point about data sovereignty, would become a part of the cloud service provider. That I would just assume that if I am using a data center in Amsterdam, I would just be basically covered for data sovereignty, whether it's Azure, AWS, GCP, doesn't matter. I think that is the next evolution that I'm waiting for. And I feel that would be I think, and I've said this a couple of times already, the CSPM as it stands today will die, unfortunately. And the CNAP++ or whatever is the new evolution is going to come from that. What would that platform look like? Where now I don't have to go to a CSPM dashboard to see cloud, or I have to go to a application security dashboard to see application security problems, vulnerability management dashboard to see vulnerability management problems. I still don't think there's one dashboard to rule them all. I still think there's a lot of integration and it'll take time, but we're definitely walking in that. Like Palo Alto is doing work in this, SentinelOne is doing work in this. I think Wiz is doing work in this as well. They're all trying to become that, or even CrowdStrike for that matter. They're all trying to be a platform, which is going to be interesting. Is what I'm looking forward to seeing how that evolves.
One platform to rule them all.
Yeah, that's apparently the promised land.
Good, man. So I know that you like to give away knowledge in sets of 3s. So here comes the next question. Could you give listeners an advice if they want to take immediate action to improve their cloud security? What are the top 3 things that they should focus on today?
First one would be identity. I think identity is not spoken about enough. And if you are in a large organization with hundreds and thousands of identity, that problem itself, I think the first time I tried working on it, man, it took like at least 6 months just to figure out how many accounts we had. And by the way, I need to add another context to this. It's not just like human users, it's non-human users as well. It's people like me, Jeroen, and everyone else over here. We have username passwords, but then all of us also create system users, or at least what used to be called system users back in the Windows days. We all use system users of some form to do automation. We also use system users to enable applications to do things at 3 a.m. in the night. And both human users and non-human users, I would say having an understanding of just the human users is a good start before you jump onto the non-human part. And the other part I would talk about is still the fact that getting an understanding of what you have in terms of you can't protect what you can't see. So the second thing I'll talk about is once you have the identity sorted in terms of asset inventory. Now, asset inventory is a big word and not everyone may have a paid solution for it, which is cloud native. So figuring out ways, which is not just an Excel sheet, that would be a great way to actually start feeling more comfortable with your security posture. And the third one I'll call out at this point in time is, I think I'm going to go back to the data part, because ultimately, if you look at what most of us security people are doing, more than the application, we actually care about data.
Yep.
Like whenever you hear a breach, you're not hearing about the fact that, oh, Uber got hacked. Oh, where 50,000 records from Uber got come. I mean, it's always the data that people talk about, because that's what hits the news, and that's what makes people go, oh, damn. Like I think there was one that happened, Santoe. I can't remember. There was a few that happened recently with Snowflake as well. All of that was data related, because data is the most juiciest thing people can find. Earlier, it used to be, oh, I got domain admin, so cool. Now it's like, oh, I got all the data and I can post about it on Twitter. So that definition has changed. So that's the third thing I would ask people to look at.
Yeah, it's not just called security, right? It's information security. So it revolves around information, right? So
we're aging ourselves, Jeroen, by saying information.
Yeah, I know.
What do you guys mean?
What?
Cybersecurity, isn't that the word? It was tired of information security. That's right.
Yeah. Ashish, thank you so much for your truly valuable insights into securing the cloud. As a last question, what resources would you recommend for our listeners to read, to listen to, or to watch to support their cloud journey, to keep up with the developments in security and cloud? We will post those resources in the show notes.
I would start by saying, don't be confused by all the cloud service providers. As I was saying in the beginning of this conversation, I feel like anyone who's trying to get into the cloud security space today, I feel fortunate that I got into it almost 10 years ago, that there was only one AWS. There was nothing else. So my choices were very simple. I guess go AWS, and that's the end of the world. Now we have Azure, AWS, GCP. I get so many questions around which one am I going for. If you are going for the cloud security as a cloud security role, you're already a security professional, I would start poking around AWS and Azure and GCP. They all have free accounts. And the best way to learn, as someone would say, the best way to learn anything is by practicing and getting involved in it and immersing yourself into it. There's a lot of good documentation on most of the cloud service providers on how to quick start your first project. Funny enough, most of the quick start projects don't do security right. So that's a good opportunity for you to use your basic fundamentals for, hey, why is this EC2 or virtual machine facing the internet for a quick start project? You could totally look into that as well. And because Ashish told me that I should not have resources on the internet. So use that as a flag to start with. If you are after interviews or if you learn more from conversations like what we're having over here, I'll do a dip for a cloud security podcast as well. And that's 250 episodes is a lot to go through, but you should at least be able to search the topic that you're interested in on the website and hopefully be able to work your way around it. I would say Cloud Security Bootcamp is an initiative that we have where we run monthly free classes for cloud security. So if money is a problem for you can't learn, it's a free class that happens every month. It's a 1 hour class. I think we get about 200 people who come in all the odd. Wow. It's a different topic every month. We do AWS, Azure, but more from a practitioner lens rather than conversations. It's going to have a YouTube channel soon as well. But I would say, though, outside those three, there is a community called Forward CloudSec. They actually have a Europe conference happening in September. Unfortunately, tickets are sold out, but it's definitely a community I would try and be part of. There's a lot of cloud security conversations. These are people like me who started ages ago. We all were looking for, hey, who's the other Ashish in cloud security across the globe or in my area? So we started doing that. And I would say those are great places to at least start learning, depending on how you learn, whether it's your audio video style or you like to get more involved, or you just like to talk to people and get to see what their side of their pain would have been for cloud security. But and also maybe I'll put an asterisk in the documentation part earlier. Don't expect AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud to have all the documentation down tight. You may start on one path, but then you discover things that they have not documented as well. So just putting that caveat in there. But hopefully, again, to what Jeroen said, I like things in three. So hopefully those three things help, not wanting to overwhelm people.
No, thanks, man. Once again, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on and tell our listeners a little bit about cloud security. So thank you. Thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. And hopefully the listeners get some value as well. And a great conversation overall.
Well, Irfaan, that was a really nice episode. I think I learned a lot. But to start with you, what did you think about our episode today?
I could not agree more with you, right? So I'm going to say that again. Having done more than 200 plus episodes on something very specific like cloud security, and then, having somebody on the show sharing the thought process from 5 years ago towards now, what are the things that really matter? And so my takeaway is really we are not really seeing fundamental challenges in cloud security compared to other aspects of information security, which we have been doing for the last, 30, 40 years. So what excited me is that Ashish tried to not overwhelm the users, right? Really say, we're going to focus on the top 3 to top 5, being misconfiguration management, still a challenge. Make sure you get that right. Automate that as much as possible. Secondly, it's identity first, right? Really think about things that really go wrong. Where are the hacks happening and how are they moving forward? It's really your identities that are being compromised. That gives them a lot of space, the bad actors a lot of space to move forward. And then last but not least, data security, right? So it's ultimately what we're trying to protect is data. And because all of the developments that are happening within the cloud, use of large language models, AI, data, the movement of data is more fluid than ever.
Yep.
So you want to also make sure you have a data security strategy in place for that. So I think those would be more key takeaway, including the fact that, it's such a great call out. And I know you want to talk more about that as well, Jeroen, but it's such a great call out from Ashish saying, we are now so much as a cybersecurity, information security industry saying we need to, go from preventive security controls to being more resilient. And what he called out is saying, how about incident response in the cloud itself? Are we ready for that? Like even just asking that question.
Yeah.
So don't assume that you're going to just put all the preventive controls in place within the cloud and some of the detective controls, and then you will be there. He's saying we should not make the same mistake that we have made in the past for non-cloud environments by just building that castle and expect that we will be secure. It's not going to work even in the cloud anymore. So thinking about resilience, thinking about incident response, it's equally important than implementing any sort of preventive controls that currently companies are still struggling with.
Great takeaways. So for me, it started with resilience, just like you mentioned, right? So I think that we as security professionals should actually move towards the field of the profession of resiliency. That is what we're doing. We should really look at all the controls and also focus on the fact that it will go wrong someday, and then we need to act, and that is what we call resilience. Restoring the services, protecting our customers if they are impacted, etc. So that was one key takeaway for me as well, because I see that during my career that has been overlooked. When I had to look at cloud security strategies, that has been overlooked. So another great takeaway, at least for me, was the fact that we shouldn't use on-prem security policies and implement them for the cloud. Leverage the cloud security capabilities, leverage the policies that you have there, the possibilities that you have there, and preferably combine that with actual information on how clouds get breached. So Ashish mentioned the MITRE ATT&CK framework, for example. They have a cloud version as well, which has the TTPs of our attackers, the tactics, techniques, and procedures that our attackers use. I think it's a valuable information if you want to secure your cloud. I know that Azure has a threat matrix or a threat research matrix themselves. We should link them in the show notes, where you can look on how Azure clouds get attacked. And that is vital to implementing the right control. So those were my key takeaways for today. Thank you for joining us on the episode of Cloud Security with Ashish Rajan. We appreciate you taking the time to tune in and explore the way we are currently reinventing security, and especially this episode in the cloud. We hope today's episode has given you valuable insights and sparked ideas on how to secure the clouds that you're working with, whether that's Amazon, whether that's Azure, or whether that's Google. But remember, when this episode ends, the real question begins: what are you going to do differently tomorrow? Let's continue to reinvent our field, one strategy at a time. In case you missed any details, I would like to refer you to our show notes. We will discuss, or we will include, any resources that our guest has mentioned, and you will find also links to our social media channels and all the sources we discussed during this episode. We always look for your input. So please, if you have any questions with regards to this episode, or you have a dream guest you'd love to hear from in our show, then shoot us a message on LinkedIn and send us an email. And please remember that your suggestion will fuel our curiosity. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on your favorite podcast player or on YouTube to stay updated with our latest episodes. Your ongoing support means everything to us. We will be back next month with another exciting episode. Until then, take care, stay curious, and bye-bye.